Good morning. It is great to spend this moment with you today. Welcome to those who are gathered here. Welcome to those who are with us online. It's great to sing the praises of our Lord whom we love and encourage one another with this time we spend together. Getting back into the book of Ecclesiastes this morning. So last week, Ecclesiastes taught us that there is nothing new under the sun. And in case you needed any proof of that, we got some last week. A quarterback named Tom led a fourth quarter comeback victory. I think I saw him high-fiving the referee on the left sideline. And our boys in silver and blue did what they do best, or at least what they do most. There's nothing new under the sun. Now, I know that for Cowboys fans, this is probably the worst possible timing that there is to do a Tom Brady-themed illustration this morning, but I have to go there today. Here he is, for non-football fans among us. This is Tom Brady. And pretty much everyone, even those who begrudgingly admit it, pretty much everyone admits at this point that he's probably the greatest quarterback to ever play football. He's thrown the most touchdowns of anybody. He's thrown the most touchdowns in the playoffs, about twice as many as the second highest player. He's won the most Super Bowls. He's won the most Super Bowl MVPs. You pretty much name a trophy or an achievement, and he probably has it in his trophy case in this $32 million mansion that he owns. Not too shabby. So Tom Brady's gotten pretty far in the world of quarterbacking. Not many people know what it's like to be Tom Brady at the top of your game. Well, the first time Tom Brady won the Super Bowl, they are interviewing him afterwards. They ask him, you know what they ask after the Super Bowl, right? Tom Brady, you've just won the Super Bowl. What are you going to do now? What does he say? I'm going to Disney World. And the second time he wins the Super Bowl, they tell him, what are you going to do now? I'm going to Disney World, happiest place on earth. The third time he wins the Super Bowl, they ask him, what are you going to do now? He says this. Why do I have 3 Super Bowl rings and still think there's something greater out there for me? Maybe a lot of people would say, hey man, this is what it is. I reached my goal, my dream, my life. Me, I think there's got to be more than this. This can't be all that it's cracked up to be. Now, this is not on the sideline after the Super Bowl, but shortly after. And the reporter is kind of surprised at this. They expecting the, boy, I'm so happy answer again. So they ask a follow-up question. Well, what do you think the answer is? To which Tom Brady said, I wish I knew. I wish I knew. And he's not the first to wonder. In fact, in the book of Ecclesiastes, if you haven't already turned there, go ahead, turn there. In the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 2, there is a moment that if you could take it and swap out that interview with Tom Brady, it would pretty much come to the same place. There's an author, Phil Ryken, who points out this comparison. I think he's spot on. The words may change, but the feeling is very much the same. I reached my goal, my dream, my life. It's got to be more than this. Maybe you've wrestled with that feeling too. It's got to be more than this. It's a question of what truly satisfies the heart. And in Ecclesiastes, at this point in Ecclesiastes, do you know what the answer is? Let's find out. Ecclesiastes 2 and verse 1. We call this the author's Tom Brady moment. I guess it's probably best that we say a word about the author of this book as well. It's widely thought, going back years and years, to have been the work of Solomon. Though, to be perfectly technical about it, it never actually mentions his name, unlike Proverbs chapter 1, verse 1, which says these are the Proverbs of Solomon. Song of Solomon, also the Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. In Ecclesiastes 1, it simply says the words of the teacher or the preacher. But right after that, it says, who is the son of David, king in Jerusalem? And who's that? That's Solomon. There's some people who say that maybe this book was written years later and takes his wisdom and finally puts it in writing, or maybe it's written in his memory. You'll find that kind of thing out there. But the point is that from the very first words of this book, it is putting before our eyes the Son of David, King in Jerusalem, Solomon, is who we're supposed to be thinking about with these words that are written here. And that makes a whole lot of sense when we get to chapter 2. Because Solomon was the guy who had it all. He is not only the one who built the breathtaking temple in Jerusalem, he was also the one who built a palace next door for himself. Took 13 years to build his palace with the finest cedar wood, what are those things called up here? What are those called? Beams. It's finest cedar wood beams. You can tell I'm into construction. It had huge windows that just let in all the beautiful natural light. I think if you do a little translating of the numbers to modern terms, it would have been at least 11,000 square feet, this palace, hand-built by the people in Israel. And if that got a little stuffy and cramped, just go next door to the Queen's Palace, which was described in that chapter as being similar to the King's Palace for one of Solomon's wives. And then down the road from that was the Hall of Thrones, where the throne was set, and Solomon could sit in this throne and judge over the problems of Israel. And it's just this gorgeous trophy room to all that Solomon has done. You could read all about this in 1 Kings chapter 7. Solomon's annual income, according to chapter 10, was 25 tons of gold. Do the math there. That's 50,000 pounds of gold annually, which comes out to a little over $1 billion by today's gold standards. Keep that in mind when we hear this from Ecclesiastes 2. I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. But behold, this also was vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of pleasure, what use is it? I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine. My heart still guiding me with wisdom into how to lay hold on folly till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forests of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house. I also had great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. I gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delights of the sons of man. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also, my wisdom remained with me. And whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept from my heart no pleasure. For my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for all my toil. But then I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil I had expended in doing it. And behold, all was vanity, and a striving after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. So we've just heard from the man who had it all. And what does he have to say about having it all? What truly satisfies the heart? It sure seems like the man who had it all can really just kind of shrug his shoulders and say, I I wish I knew. I wish I knew. I have given a lot of things the chance to be the thing that satisfies the heart. I tried bigger and better stuff. Verse 4, I built houses, plural houses, and planted vineyards, plural. I made gardens and parks and pools, like all this stuff. But bigger and better things didn't really do it for me, he says. So I tried money. I gathered all my silver and my gold and my treasures, which, remember, we're thinking of Solomon here. That's a lot of silver and gold and treasures. A whole lot. Money didn't really do it for me, he says. I searched for satisfaction in distraction. Verse 3 talks about wine. Verse 2 talks about laughter. Verse 8 about singers and concubines, but things like sex and wine and entertainment, I thought they would be a great escape from these things, but they didn't really satisfy the heart. I searched for satisfaction in achievements, especially those things that showed how much better and further I had gotten than everybody else. I surrounded myself with people in my house who had to do exactly what I told them to. They were not on my level. I made it clear to everyone around me that I had more possessions than anyone before me. I was greater than anyone before me. And then I considered all that my hands had done and the toil that I expended in doing it. And what was it? Were any of these things the thing that truly satisfies the heart? I think we know the answer to that question. And yet, how many of these things continue to be the things that consume our search for what truly satisfies, for meaning and purpose and joy in life? Bigger and better stuff. Money. Distractions. Achievements, and the list could go on and on. Many of these things, in the right context, could even be called good, right? A whole lot of them. So with laughter, that's like one of the greatest blessings of God, that we can have joy in our hearts, an emotion that he's given us. Sex is a gift of our good creation by God's design. To set out and do something and accomplish it, that's like really gratifying, isn't it? And what about all that money and the houses and the other things? It's worth noting that God himself blessed Solomon with those very things. His wealth, his possessions, his position, his legacy. These things come from God. In the case of Solomon, they're meant to be a blessing to him. They're meant to be good things. But they are not, however, meant to be the thing. You see the difference, right? And even when God gives these things to Solomon in striking abundance, remember why it is that he gives him all this stuff? Remember why? There's a story about that in 1 Kings chapter 3. For Solomon, these blessings follow after his desire to know God deeply. So when Solomon was just becoming king, it says he loved the Lord. He followed in the ways of his father. And the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream. How's this for a dream? And says, ask what I shall give you. Ask me for something. Ask me for anything. God says to Solomon. What does Solomon ask for? What could Solomon have asked for? Bigger and better things. Money, a life of pleasure and not pain, more status, more legacy, more achievements, more honors. But what does he ask for instead? He wants an understanding mind. He wants to know how to do what he's been called to do, to be who he's been called to be, the King of Israel. He wants to know the difference between good and evil. In short, he wants to know God's ways. You could say, in a sense, that he desired to know God by wanting these things, because these are things you need in order to know God. And God blesses him with wisdom, and also, on top of that, all those other things that we just looked at. But all those other things were always secondary to the one thing. They were not to be confused with the number one thing: knowing God, knowing him completely. But it's one thing to know that, and it's another thing to live like you know that. And Solomon, down the line, when we get to Ecclesiastes, seems to get confused with the other things being the thing, the one thing. And maybe for us, the problem is not knowing what is best or ultimate or what truly satisfies. Maybe the problem, the challenge for us is living like we know that to be the case. It is so tempting to live our lives as though our identity and our joy can be summed up in what we have and what we do and what we've accomplished and what we've earned and what we enjoy, our favorite things, in our social identity, in our professional identity, in our sexual identity, in our academic identity, and in the acceptance and approval of our peers, and trying to have it all. When in fact Ecclesiastes says, take it from me, I had all those things. Those are things that can never truly satisfy your heart. I had all those things. What did I find in them? Not the answer. So what do we do then? What do we do if we also are prone to seek after these things to find our true joy? And what do we do if maybe we have done a little bit of that and we're finding the results of it that, well, it doesn't really satisfy our hearts? Well, you remember how last week when we talked about life's troubles under the sun, how they actually served a good purpose? Like for people who really wrestle with the troubles in this life, it can awaken in us a desire for that life beyond the sun. Well, I wonder if there's something like that going on here too, that our struggles to find what truly satisfies, our feelings of dissatisfaction with it, might actually point us down the road toward what truly can satisfy. This is something that the writer C.S. Lewis believed to be true. You guys know that I'm a fan of old Clive Staples Lewis. In the book Mere Christianity, he addresses this in a chapter on hope. One of the things he says is that most people, if they really had learned to look in our own hearts, would know that they want, and want acutely, something that cannot be had in this world, and yet there are all sorts of things in this world that offer to give it to you. The problem is they just don't live up to their promise. And when you recognize this, when you feel that dissatisfaction, that lack of wholeness, that Tom Brady at the microphone, this can't be all that it is, what you do next is really critical. You got some options. C.S. Lewis talks about 3 ways you could respond to that feeling in your heart. One way is called the fool's way. That doesn't make it sound good. The fool's way, of course, is when you blame the dissatisfaction in your life on the things in your life. So if only my car were the better car, or if only my house were that other house in that other neighborhood, and the wife, the other wife, or the husband, the other husband, and pretty soon you're trading out the one thing for the next thing in hopes that that thing might be the thing, and it never really ends up being it. It always somehow falls short. You've probably seen examples of life lived this way. Maybe you've experienced it from time to time yourself. So you got some other options. Another option is to live the, quote, sensible way. And this is for people who can clearly see the problem with the fool's way. Like, that's never going to really bring satisfaction. So what you learn to do is just kind of settle down and press down those stirrings of your heart for more. Don't expect too much in life. No use chasing after rainbows. Enjoy the little things and don't expect much or seek much. Lewis says that's a whole lot happier way to live than the first way. It might actually be a good way to live if we were not created for eternity. But suppose there really is out there true abundant joy. Suppose there is such a thing as something that truly, fully satisfies the heart. What a pity it would be to find out too late that in all of our sensible common sense, we missed out on a chance for true abundant joy. So then comes the third way. He calls it the Christian way. This is when we realize how God has made us. And if I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable, excuse my typo, explanation is that I was made for another world. So think about that feeling we have in our hearts to not be separated from the ones we love. Is there anything in the world that satisfies that fully and completely, ultimately? But that desire is there in us. What if that desire is reminding us that we were made for another world? And that sense you have in your heart that things are wrong, unjust, the evil in this world that is broken and you don't see it fixed. If there's nothing in this world that fixes it, could it be that that desire in our hearts is pointing us to something else? And there are all sorts of little glimmers of the joy and satisfaction and wonderfulness of this other world here in this life, and we praise God for every single one that we're given. Lewis says even the best of these are just the start, just the glimmer, just an echo of what we hope to find someday. So then every one of those joys in this life, and also those moments of dissatisfaction, they're awakening us the remembrance of our true home. They are inviting us to press on and seek what truly satisfies. We are to be, in other words, like Paul hoped to be, which is also very similar to what Solomon in the beginning hoped to be too. He said, I want to know Christ, know his rising. And that pursuit of what truly satisfies is filled with blessing. It leads us to press on toward the ultimate blessing, the call that brings us heavenward in Jesus. But also there are the blessings that follow here and now. We read this in our scripture today. It's called contentment. And it's something you can have when you know what truly satisfies. Contentment is being less consumed by the race for lesser things. That bigger and better stuff, the money, the acclaim, the fleeting pleasures. Contentment is freedom from knowing what truly satisfies. And it's what God offers to us in Jesus. I'll close with this. I don't know if we have any fans of the band U2 here today. One of the most famous songs by U2 is one called I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For. I guess Ecclesiastes is just making me think of songs with these past two sermons. And a little pro tip, you should never title your sermon after a song, because then it'll be stuck in your head the whole week, and by the time Sunday comes, you're so sick of it, you don't even want to talk about it. But I remember this song, one of the things that I remember most was 4 a.m., front passenger seat of the church van, driving back from Wilderness Trek, and Marcus Neely was a big fan of U2. We listened to those songs, most everybody was asleep. We listened to this song driving home from that trip. I wonder if U2 or Bono were reading Ecclesiastes 2 when they wrote this song. Because it talks about a person who climbs the highest mountains, who kisses honey lips, who speaks with the tongue of angels, who holds the hand of the devil, but who still hasn't found what they're looking for. It's talking about a person who has tried and searched here and there and everywhere in this life for that thing that truly satisfies, but hasn't found it here in this world. And the truth that Ecclesiastes brings to us is that all people in one way or another will sing that song. All people, if you really get down to it, will find that in this life, we have not yet found what we're looking for. The question is, how will we sing it? Will we sing it with the heavy heart of one who has searched and still doesn't know where to look? I wish I knew. I wish I knew. Or will you sing it as one who knows where your true hope is? Who knows where to find it and you're pressing toward it? You just haven't gotten there yet. Jesus offers a way to change our song. He offers contentment and joy today, and the promise of an even greater tomorrow. He invites you to know God deeply and to choose his way, which is the way to those things which truly satisfy. Maybe today it's time to let him change your song. Maybe today in your life you need to stop seeking the things that don't satisfy and prioritize and strive after the things that truly matter, that offer true joy in the end. Maybe for someone you need to respond to the gospel, which is an expression of our dissatisfaction with the world in this life, that it cannot bring true joy, and the placing of all our hope in Jesus, that he might offer that true joy in the end and bring it into our lives here and now as well, as we seek to follow him. However you may be called or challenged, we invite this moment to reflect in your hearts and respond while we stand, while we sing.